Hi, good afternoon from England, and good morning to I think most of our listeners will probably be in the United States, and I know we also have some other folks calling in, hopefully from internationally, and welcome to you all. This is the third in the webinar series for the US Trail Running Conference this year, and thank you so much for your participation and. We look forward to a great, really inspirational and educational webinar. We're going to be looking at zero carbon events and how to put on zero carbon events. And we're very fortunate to have three experts in the field with us. Without further ado, if we can, Claire, if you don't mind introducing yourself and just explain what you do and why you're excited to be here.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Claire. I work at Native. We're a carbon project developer. And we've worked with Terry and Amy and Porter and other folks in the trail running industry on addressing emissions, calculating emissions, and supporting climate projects. So we're really glad to get to do that and to support this webinar. And also just excited to talk a little bit more about what's going on in the carbon market right now as these different interesting pieces have come up.
Cool. Thank you so much. Amy, do you want to do the same thing?
Sure. I'm Amy. I am a trail runner and a race director. I work for Spartan Trail, and I have my own sustainable running company called The Running Kind, which Claire mentioned. We have had the pleasure of working together. Yeah, I'm excited to talk a little bit more about putting on zero carbon events and how we can move towards more sustainable running.
Cool. And Porter, can you do the same?
Yeah, my name is Porter Bratton, and I'm one of the owners of Evergreen Trail Runs, which is a race production company for trail races out in Washington State. I'm a trail runner myself, and have spent a lot of time the past year and a half figuring out how to make our races carbon neutral. And so attended the trail running conference last year and kind of talked a bit or learned a bit about that, and have worked with Claire on getting our offsets. So looking forward to this webinar.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Amy, would you mind just dropping something in the chat, and I just want to make sure that that's functioning okay. If you can see that, okay. Yeah, thank you to all three of you for the introductions there. Yeah. Oh, Amy, could you try? You'll set it for host and panelists. So if you set it for everyone, then hopefully everyone will be able to see it. Okay, brilliant. But I can see it, so that part works. Good.
Actually, don't see everyone as an option.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just as host and panelist, or I can send like each of the three of you a private message.
A private message. Okay, that's interesting. All right. Zoom seemed to kind of change things around a little bit every time we do a webinar. But hey, the main thing is we got the three of you here, and we're all on screen. So and hopefully everybody out there can hear us okay. All right. So next thing I'm going to do is I just want to say, give a big vote of thanks for our folks, our partners at Marathon Printing. They are the presenting sponsor for this series, and just want to introduce you for those of you that don't know Marathon Printing already. They're a family-owned company, specializes in producing custom printed items for endurance sports. Race bibs are their most popular item, either custom printed or stock bibs. Marathon Printing also supplies vital accessories for race directors like pins, bags, and pennant flags, as well as postcards, business cards, brochures, bumper stickers, and labels. And I found out last year at the conference that they can also do lanyards as well. They've been a loyal supporter of the US Trail Running Conference since 2015 and are also an event standard partner for ATRA. And we're very grateful to Ryan and Zirk and the team at Marathon Printing for their support of this webinar. And yeah, we encourage you to support them. Without further ado, I'll get you back there. Okay, I will now share my screen, so we'll get the slide deck going. So hopefully, yeah, can you guys see that okay?
Yep.
And Claire, brilliant, thank you. Okay, so yeah, with as I said, we're presented by Marathon Printing. The session sponsor for this one, for this session is Native, and thank again to Claire for enabling that to happen. So this is quick kind of housekeeping. Feel free to add anything in terms of chat on the way through. But if you have any questions, if you could use the Q&A function, then that would be really helpful, and we'll do our best to answer questions actually on the way through. And so we've done introductions. I'm Terry Chicklin. I just didn't introduce myself. I'm the event director for the US Trail Running Conference, and also organized this webinar series. And so, yeah, so that's a nice picture of Claire. Claire, where was this taken? Do you remember where that was? What's your background?
I think that was in grad school at the little forest garden next to our building.
Okay, cool. Just a couple of years ago then.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And Amy, this is you on top of, looks like Whiteface Mountain. So you look pretty happy at that point.
Yeah, I was pretty stoked. Yeah, that was at the Whiteface Mountain race last year.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Did you do well?
I came in 4th.
Nice. Good job. Good job.
Okay.
Okay. It looks like it's pretty steep, but yeah.
Yeah, it was a little gnarly at the top there.
Okay. And Porter, this is I'm kind of intrigued. Is this Pacific Northwest, or is this somewhere out of your territory? Oh, you're muted, Porter.
There we go. No, that's France. That was in 2019 when my wife and I did part of the Tour de Mont Blanc.
Oh,
I took a selfie because why not?
Why not indeed? Okay, that's a beautiful picture. Okay, so before we get going, then I'm going to use the slide deck, and just to let you know, everybody will get a copy of this slide deck when I send out the session recording tomorrow, so that you'll all get a chance to have a look at this out of the session as well. And what we're doing is, so I asked our 3 panelists, so in Claire's case, I asked her to come up and deliver the current hot topics in the carbon offset world. And then for Amy, I asked her to present factors that are critical for RDs that you can help race directors with regarding analysis of footprint and working out zero carbon and so on. And then with Porter, then I asked him to present us with key factors that you have experienced actually implementing a zero carbon policy for his races. So, so Claire, you're going to be first up. And so if you can take it away, just let me know, just say Terry or slide, and I'll get on to the next slide for you whenever you're ready.
All right, thanks. So hi, everybody. So I'm going to chat about 4 updates from the carbon market. And these are topics you may have heard of, but I'm hoping I can shed more light on why they're coming up, what they mean, and why they might be relevant to you. So the first one is carbon project integrity. So the market is definitely seeing increased scrutiny from media and civil society. You've probably seen several articles criticizing the integrity of certain carbon projects or carbon project types. And in general, we see this as a good thing. We need to keep raising the standards for all of these projects, and we need to make sure that projects that are not designed in good faith don't get validated or supported. But we don't want media criticism to go so far as to scare anyone away from supporting any carbon project. There are a lot of really great projects out there, and carbon finance is needed to make them happen. So one example you might have heard about is criticism around forestry protection projects. So to explain that, a lot of the issue here comes from potentially inflated baseline estimations. So this happens when projects go to protect a forest and then they calculate the avoided emissions associated with avoided deforestation. And then they overestimate how much deforestation would have occurred in the absence of the project. So what the media has argued in these cases is that these forests would have been mostly protected without that project. So it's really important that developers are thoughtful and accurate when they're developing these counterfactual scenarios of what would have happened in absence of the project, because that's how we're creating the, quantifying the impact of the project. But you can imagine that it's also quite challenging. And then, project quality goes beyond baselines. So there are a number of other key criteria you can look into as you're exploring projects, or you can work with, a group like us to explore these questions. So some things that I would recommend you ask of a project or in a developer is, how is this project additional? Meaning, why is it true that this intervention would not have occurred without the project? How do you estimate the baseline, as in that counterfactual scenario? How do you ensure project permanence, meaning that the emissions continue, are long-lasting and durable? And then what kind of co-benefits to communities or ecosystems will this project deliver? So when you're supporting a project, you want to make sure you can get some answers to those types of questions. Next item is supporter claims or claims integrity. So when an organization supports or purchases offsets, you can see that they are also receiving increased scrutiny around claims they may have made about a project. You might have seen something where, like Exxon or Shell, I can't remember which, had a carbon neutral oil. And there's a lot of media backlash about that. Not something you really have to be worried about as much in a trail race, but still our recommendation for all project supporters is to be as accurate and transparent as possible to when you're communicating your climate actions. And when that goes to offsetting, or we recommend that you state, here's our emissions footprint, here's how we calculated it, here's where we've reduced as much as we could, and here's the project we've chosen to support and purchase offsets from. And then just describe a little bit about how that project works and actually causes climate change mitigation. The next item is this sort of difference between project types. So there's both removals and avoidance. So removals projects are projects that sequester carbon either biologically in ecosystems like trees or soils, or through technology. And avoidance projects are projects that avoid emissions that would have otherwise occurred by, protecting a forest that would have been deforested, or protecting land that would have been tilled up, or implementing a new type of more energy efficient fuel or technology. There's been increased market demand for removals, which is partially spurred by this Science-Based Target Initiative net zero standard, which requires companies to reduce emissions by 90% and then remove the rest, through supporting removals projects to be able to claim net zero. There are virtually no companies that are there yet or even close. A lot of these net zero goals are for 2040 or 2050. But there's still this current demand for removals projects. So our perspective here is that, yes, it's good to build more removal projects, but right now there shouldn't be a bias against avoidance projects. Both are good and the climate impact is equivalent. And then finally, I wanted to introduce you all to a great partner of ours, Reverb, that I thought could be good inspiration for putting on sustainable events. Reverb has been a partner of ours for over a decade, and they work with musicians and music venues to green concert events and engage fans on climate action. So they create these eco-villages at concerts where fans can engage with volunteers on environmental issues and connect with nonprofit organizations. And so, for example, in 2022, their tour partners included Billie Eilish, Dave Matthews Band, and Fish. And for the Billie Eilish tour, they raised nearly $1 million to support nonprofits. They offered plant-based entree options at every venue with price parity to non-vegan options, partially because Billie is vegan. And they registered over 4,000 new voters. And then they supported carbon projects to adjust the footprint from band, crew, and fan travel, as well as venue energy use. So their website is reverb.org if you want to learn anything more about them. And I thought that might provide some interesting inspiration for how, you know, a similar model could be set up for trail races. And I will stop there and pass it on. Thanks very much.
Wow. Claire, thank you so much. So is it okay if I, I'm sure it is, but I just want to check it. If I share the website for reverb.org?
Absolutely, yes. I just wasn't able to access the group in the chat, so.
Okay. Darn Zoom. Okay, so, but I can share that on the chat. So, see now. There we go. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's fascinating, Claire. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up, as you said, you know, some of the concerns about project integrity and claims integrity as well, and then the difference between removals and avoidance. So thank you so much for covering that. Just a quick question before we move on to Amy. Then, well, actually, a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
That have you seen? I mean, you know, we've been working together now for oh gosh, a couple of years. Is it maybe nearly 3 years now? And have you seen an increase in you know, kind of interest in these areas from the trail running scene? Is that something that you've been cognizant of?
I think that, yeah, I've definitely seen more interest and demand in, you know, finding ways to support climate action, you know, carbon offsets being one piece of that. And I think, yeah, you know, each of those I've spoken to in this industry have, you know, had questions and interest in the integrity behind each project. And that's been a conversation we've been able to have together. I don't think the removals versus avoidance thing has really come up, if I can remember. But yeah, I think, and then the piece around, you know, sustainable event management, I think Amy's going to have a lot of great examples to speak to there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the removals of avoidance piece is interesting, isn't it? Because as you said, you know, I think they're both equally important, but I guess people may have different ideas about which they would prefer to support. So yeah, and there's you know, some of the removals pieces that are coming out in terms of you know, research and capturing carbon and putting it into into different locations is kind of mind-boggling. But yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so Amy, over to you. You're next up. So yeah, if you take over here and tell us about emissions and scope 3.
Sure. It's always so great to be on these webinars with everyone, especially Claire, because I feel like it's just a place to consistently be learning more about the industry. And that was great. So thanks, Claire. Yeah, so I kind of just broke it down into 3 areas where I try to focus my energy when I'm putting on events, and how I'm making them carbon neutral. The largest piece is kind of calculating emissions. So I started the Running Kind last year and had a bit of a trial period to calculate the emissions of runners coming to and from events when I was working with Blue Mountain Resort, putting on races there and trying to make those events zero carbon before I actually launched the Running Kind. And really what I have kind of stuck with, oh, 1 second, the lights went out.
Oh.
Okay. What I have kind of stuck with so far has been just adding $1 to registration for the Running Kind. And that is now included in my registration price. That $1 of every registration will be set aside strictly for runner transportation, which is consistently the largest chunk of emissions per event that I've had. And my events so far have been fairly local, but going later into this year, I am getting into kind of a larger range or radius. I'm having some events further from my home location. So making sure to include like my site visit travel up to those places, any volunteer travel if I'm having group runs, which was something that was brought up last webinar we had. I would have course previews and things like that to promote the event. I've now started including those that mileage into my emissions calculations for runner transportation to make sure that the things I'm doing to promote the event leading up to the event are now covered in those offset purchases. Zero carbon practices. I mean, luckily with putting on trail events, especially small local trail events, there's not too much that really accumulates in terms of waste or emissions that need to be focused on outside of runner transportation. At least for my first 2 events, that was the larger chunk. Some things that I have started to discuss but have not perfected or really dialed in are some carpool systems and how to navigate connecting runners from certain areas. It's been a little easier. I have a Facebook group for the Running Kind. So through that, I'm trying to connect the people that are interested in running my environmentally friendly events. And then I'm kind of hoping that we can create some type of group transportation network through that Facebook event page. Now getting into some further locations from home. I have a community that's following me to those events, which is great. We're looking into group lodging recommendations and things of that nature that will then get put into emissions calculations and is kind of a next step for larger events. And then really just like local marketing and community engagement that hasn't been too much of an emissions calculator, but like I said, like when I'm going up to certain areas and traveling more to check out certain locations or go visit sponsors in person, I'm making sure to include those that mileage in the emissions calculations. I don't have an exact number. I was going to see if I could find an exact number from my last event, but I'll look when Porter is going through his information and see if I can find that. All right, the next kind of section after like emissions calculations and what I have been purchasing and offsets is value alignment. So really just finding other organizations that are prioritizing climate action and climate justice, which can be difficult, especially in the running space. there have been a lot of shoe companies that are making strides in this area. Last year I partnered with On Running, but I feel like almost every shoe brand that I have kind of spoken to recently has at least one shoe that is like made out of some recycled materials, which is great. It's nice to see that a lot of those companies are moving towards that. This year I'm partnering with Tarkine Running, which is actually not a US based company. They're based in Australia, and they make 100% sustainable running shoes. They just came out with their first trail shoe. So I'm excited to be partnered with them and helping them kind of bring some visibility to the US. And yeah, just trying to find other brands that connect with the running kind. Some of which have been Who Gives a Crap, which is a sustainable toilet paper brand that the runners seem to really enjoy. Everyone that runs a running kind race gets a free roll of toilet paper at bib pickup. And we also try to do a sustainable runner raffle so that brands can donate an item, and then any funds raised through the raffle are donated to a nonprofit. But yeah, some areas that I feel like I've figured out since the last webinar in this specific area too have been reusable materials, specifically race bibs. I was really struggling to find a recycled race bib or a reusable race bib. And since then, I have actually made my own race bibs out of a cloth material and painted the numbers on, and we'll be using those hopefully for years to come. So at the end of every race, runners have to turn in their bibs. They don't get to keep them, which they were a little sad about. But they're now turning in their race bib and they're getting a fat tire, which is the only carbon neutral beer. And it has been a good trade-off. They've been happy about the beer. So, and it has helped limit waste. Like I said, my events are fairly small, so there's not a lot of waste. We have usually one bin for waste, one bin for compost, one bin for recycling, one bin for TerraCycling, and usually one bin is all we need for each. So there's not too much waste to account for in those offsets, like I mentioned before. And then the only other thing I really try to focus on, mostly because I myself am vegan, but all of our events have plant-based nutrition, and only partner with companies that supply plant-based nutrition, which this year Gnarly Nutrition is our main aid station sponsor, and Complement, who is the sister company for No Meat Athlete, has provided us with a good bit of nutrition as well. All right. And then the last area is really just runner experience. As kind of Claire mentioned, that people have maybe been increasing their questioning. I do get a lot on how we're actually carbon neutral. The Running Kind is not a nonprofit yet. And so there's a lot of speculation as to what my costs are, and how it all works. So just trying to be transparent about that. I usually try to set aside about 15 minutes before the race starts when you have your normal pre-race discussions, instead of just hopping out 5 minutes and hyping up the runners and sending them on their way, really to have like a full discussion about how we're carbon neutral, what project we're investing in. I always try to purchase the carbon offsets before race day. And this last race we had in March, I just kind of tacked on an extra metric ton of offsets to make sure that if we had any day of registrations, which typically I don't see many of, that their transportation would be covered, and that we could actually ensure that we were carbon neutral. And then, if you don't get any race day registrations, or you get some that are way further than you think, which likely if they're coming on day of race is not the case, you can always go back and purchase more later that day. But yeah, just trying to set aside time to kind of discuss with the runners what it means to have a carbon neutral event. We make sure to do sustainable swag. So our finisher items are bottle cap pins that we put compostable stickers on the inside. And I paint the outsides of them. So just trying to reuse materials that otherwise would be thrown away. As I mentioned before, we always select a nonprofit to engage with and raise money for, either through registration or through our runner raffle, or both. A lot of times too, I will set aside a budget of, like, once we break even in our costs, to go to that nonprofit as well. And then the runner raffle and sustainable giveaways have been a really fun way to engage the runners with our sponsors that have these awesome products that maybe aren't as popular as the big name brands that you see on Instagram or on Facebook. So that has been a really fun way to get runners to actually use the products and move towards more sustainable products. And on the runner raffle, I typically have information about the sponsor so that they can see how or why they're sustainable in some way. Those were kind of the three, vast areas that I wanted to touch on, but there's a lot of details that I have kind of worked out, especially with Claire, when I first started hosting zero carbon events, and like how to actually calculate all of your emissions and what goes into the back end, math of it. But usually it can be done in a spreadsheet. It's pretty straightforward. And yeah, it's very easy to calculate and to ensure that your events are sustainable.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. We've got Porter, before we move on, a few questions here. So first one, I hope I answered for you, Gary. So you said, Amy talks about the running kind. I Googled it and all I get is a country western song. So I sent him information that said it's therunningkind.net.
Yeah.
So if you type that into your address bar, then I'm sure that will pop up okay, and you won't get a country and western song. or maybe it'll be what's your favorite music, Amy? I mean,
my mom just told me that the other day. She was like, I Googled the running kind and all I get is the YouTube video. I was like, I don't know, maybe more people need to search me, Mom. I'm not sure. But yeah, therunningkind.net. We're also on Facebook as The Running Kind, and Instagram is @therunningkind with an underscore at the end.
Yeah. So this is a question from me now. The Facebook group you mentioned for The Running Kind, then is that a public page or group, or can anybody join that? Or
anyone can join it. It is private, just because when I started it, I wanted to keep it kind of small, and I wanted to make sure that people that were joining it actually had a reason to be joining it. A lot of the one group that I had prior to this, I just wanted to make sure it was a safe space. And now that it is private, I can't turn it public. So it has to remain private. Right. But that being said, anyone can request to join it, and you will be welcomed with open arms. All the vegan runners are happy to welcome you.
So are you okay if I share the link for that particular page as well with the information?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yep. Cool. Then Venkatraman, and Porter, thank you for replying on this. So he said here, has anyone tried making running bibs out of seed impregnated paper that can be later planted? And so Porter, you've had a go at this. or you have
Yeah, we talked about doing this, but we put on races in Western Washington and it rains a lot. And so, you can picture you've got a paper that dissolves in water and you've got that where the safety pin goes through the hole and it kind of gets weak and it just falls on the ground or something, could lead to issues. So we haven't done that yet. Haven't run tests just to see how dissolvable the paper is, but it would be great if somebody tried it out and maybe on a small scale.
Our first event, that's what I did. I was so stoked. And that's exactly what happened. It rained. And right at that spot where the pin goes through, all of the bibs fell off. So, I mean, in some ways, it wasn't the worst case scenario because, they weren't dissolving, but they were definitely littered all over. Like when I cleaned up the trail, I was picking up tons of seed paper bibs out there.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Appreciate the response on that. So Grace mentions it would be great if links to some of those sustainable shoe companies that Amy mentioned could be shared as well. Super cool. Many thanks. So Amy, are you okay if I include links to those companies that you mentioned as well in the information I send out?
Yep. And I'm happy to put together a list of our sponsors. If you go to our website, at the bottom of each section, so we have a gear page. If you scroll all the way down, you'll see our listed sponsors. But yeah, I mean, offhand, On Running is one that is very focused on sustainability. Newton, I believe, is another one that is very focused. I just saw Topo has a shoe coming out that is made of recycled materials. As I mentioned, Tarkine. And then, yeah, those are really the main ones that come to mind, but I'm sure that more do.
Yeah, sure. Adidas is another one that comes to mind, making shoes and recycled products too. So Gary also has a question. Is your runner raffle sold at registration or on race day or both?
So every runner gets one raffle ticket included in registration, and then they can purchase additional raffle tickets, or spectators can purchase raffle tickets day of race.
Cool, excellent. And then Venkatraman, he came back with an answer. He said we put the paper bibs, we put them inside reusable Ziploc bags. So that's an interesting solution, because then, I guess that's Venkatraman. I know you can't speak to us, but maybe if you could let us know on the Q&A here or the chat how that went for you. So that would be interesting. Okay.
I will say the cloth material bibs that we made for my last race in March worked really well. It poured that race too. I seem to only have races that draw in the rain, but they held up great. The paint was great on them, and it's just a single piece of like a thick cloth. I can't think of what it is right now, but I'll think of it and I'll send it to you. And then we didn't even have to put holes or anything in it, because you can just pin right through it. And I threw them in the wash machine. They're clean for the next race and super easy.
Right. Cool. And just a heads up here, and I hope I'm not talking out of turn, but Marathon Printing, our presenting sponsor for the series, webinar series, that they're actually working on a recycling program for Tyvek bibs. So I'm hoping we'll have some.
Awesome.
Definitely keep you all apprised. Okay, so Porter, moving on to you, and welcome. Sorry to keep you to last, and appreciate your patience. And I hope you got my note that feel free to interlude or include any jokes on the way through.
Oh yeah, right. Dad jokes. Oh man. What do you call? I always tell dad jokes at the start line of the races that we put on. So what do you call two chimpanzees who share an Amazon account? Primate mates.
Oh, very good.
So yeah, thanks for inviting me, Terry.
Pleasure.
Here, and I feel like Amy covered a lot of. Amy is another race director, so we're coming at the same issue from different places. Because from what I've heard Amy say, that she kind of started her races with the intent to be carbon neutral from the get-go, and was able to kind of do a little test run, it sounds like, at different events to see how it work before starting out her events. I was coming at it from a different angle, that we've been putting on races for a while and they were not carbon neutral in the past. And so even though I'm kind of talking about the same problem, maybe this is more relevant to somebody who's listening who currently has races and wants to kind of implement it, as opposed to doing it from the get-go. So hopefully this is helpful, even if I'm kind of repeating some things. I think for me, the big thing with implementing this is that it felt, because we have a lot of races and we have like 25 races a year, so we don't have a lot of time in between races to kind of like revisit or rehash. Really have to like approach it as a, well, let's try this and let's get into the cycle of operations, and then once we've got that down, let's move on to the next thing, as opposed to trying to do everything all at once, because that could easily be overwhelming and could distract from kind of like, you still got to put the race on. There's a lot of work there, and you want to have them be carbon neutral, but you still have to make sure that like your course is well marked and you've got all the bases covered. Yeah, the kind of factors I listed for Terry is how to fund it. And it's funny, Amy said that she charges $1 per runner to cover the carbon offsetting, and we charge almost essentially, I think we're at 96 cents. So we use Run Sign Up for registration, and we just set up so that there's an additional fee of 96 cents, and it shows up as a line item when people check out. So we're having the runners pay for it. Is basically the question of how to fund it. Other race directors may choose to not do that way. But the reason we did that is, twofold. One is basically save money on our end, but also the more that I think the more that you can bring the general topic of sustainability or carbon neutrality to the forefront of the mind of the participant, the better. So if there's multiple things pre-race, race day, and post-race where you can remind them of different things that have to do with sustainability, that is good. So that's just one of many touch points where they see that line item in registration. There's a carbon neutral, there's a carbon offset fee. And I've only had one person complain about it out of many thousand, so not a big deal and pretty easy to set up. So we can go ahead and go on to the next point. Okay, yeah, so you got to figure out what you're going to define as your footprint. And for most races, it's going to be, the overwhelming majority is going to be the participant travel to and from the race. Estimates vary, but from what I've seen, when we did our own calculations, I think it was about 92%. I've seen other places put it as high as like 98%. So, but regardless, that getting to and from the race is going to be the single largest thing. Everything else is going to be kind of just a percentage of that. So one thing that we did that I will share with Terry is we made an Excel spreadsheet that I would like to share with people, whoever wants it, where you can just paste in the addresses of all the runners, and then it will automatically calculate the distance. It's a straight line distance. It doesn't take into account roads. It's not quite that complicated or fancy. But it will calculate the straight line distance between your venue and where they live, and calculate the round trip miles. And then from that, you can put in a couple of different numbers that represent assumptions that you're going to make. Right now, it's kind of work in progress, but right now, the 4 numbers you can put in is the percentage of your overall footprint that consists of your participant travel. So if you can put in 85%, you can put in 95%, you can put in whatever number you want to put. If you put a lower percentage in, then you'll offset more. You can also put in the average miles per gallon of all the people driving. I just used the national average, which is 22 miles per gallon. You can also put in the no-show rate, since every race is people that don't go. And then there's lastly right now what I'm calling just a fudge factor, that is essentially like how much do you want to overcompensate for this number, that kind of cover the things that you didn't think of, or just kind of as a insurance policy to make sure that you're going above and beyond that carbon neutral point and even going to carbon negative. So for a recent, the one that right now in the spreadsheet that I'll share with Terry, I've got a race that we had, and it came in at 11.4 metric tons of emissions for the race. So kind of a long-winded answer for the question of what you consider as part of the footprint, but it's mostly going to be the participant travel. The other things that you can measure that we've started measuring are, I use Cloverly I send them all of our shipments. So we use stamps.com for all of our shipping, all the stuff, shipping awards, shipping shirts, shipping merchandise we sell. So once a quarter, I send them everything that we've shipped that past quarter, and then they send me back amount to offset, and I buy the offset, and it's very easy. So that's one other thing that you can be very transparent about. You can put that number on your website and say, yeah, in 2022 we had 600 kilograms of emissions that came from shipping things, and so we've offset them with this project. There are other things that I think are much harder to measure, that you would need probably a expensive consulting company or whatnot to figure out. But like, as was said earlier, I think the more transparent you can be, and the more precise you can be about what you are actually offsetting and how you're measuring, the more people will trust that you are legitimate, that you're doing this, and will probably feel good about signing up for your race. Yeah, so we can go ahead and go on to the next slide, Terry. Yeah, so Claire, Claire and Amy talked about this, that essentially there are things you can do to reduce your footprint, and there are things, and then once you've done everything you can, you need to offset the remainder. Until everybody's driving an electric car, and that electric car is powered by or recharged by renewable energy, you're not going to be able to reduce your net footprint to zero. But just thinking about what you can do around the margins to reduce it is great. Amy talked about carpooling. I feel like carpooling is the holy grail of the niche field of carbon neutral race directing, because it is kind of a sticky problem, because you've got all these people coming from different locations. If you have different distances at one race, they're starting at different times maybe. They might not know each other, and so the more that you can, I think Amy's got a great setup where she's got a more tight-knit community, and so she's going to have an easier time getting people to carpool since they are more well connected. But if you have maybe a race where you don't have that for whatever reason, it's going to be a much steeper hill to climb to get people to carpool. So it's something I've thought about. Right now it feels kind of very daunting, like implementing a widespread carpool policy. There are small things that we've sort of tried to experiment with, where for example, we have some races where the parking is pretty limited, and so we've tried it out where you can charge if the car shows up and there's one runner in the car, they got to pay $5 for parking fee. But if they show up and there's two runners in the car, if they carpooled, they can say, the parking's free. And that's something that we can't do for every race, but it's a good example of just an experimentation, which is what we're all about, is trying out different things to see what will work and what won't, and what's going to be able to be that we can do over and over again at all of our races, as opposed to just one. Other things that to reduce, Amy talked about a lot of these things, that waste, sorting your waste is a big thing, where if multiple bins for different things. And the change that we made is that we had different bins for a long time, but what we changed is instead of having the runners put their waste in the appropriate bin, they put it on a table and then a volunteer puts it in the right thing. Because we found that, especially, most everybody gets what's compostable and what's not, for the most part. Recycling is a real, I am always amazed at the things that people put in the recycling bin that they think is recyclable. So by having somebody who actually knows what goes where, you will not only save yourself the gross job of reaching into a garbage bag and pulling out non-recyclable things or whatnot, but you will then prevent things from getting contaminating your recycling that you send off to the recycling plant. So that's a real simple thing to do, is just putting a volunteer in charge of that will make your waste reduction much more effective. And that's really worked. I mean, we've gone from many bags of garbage to just a couple, even at larger races. And then the other part of that kind of goes in line is just being cupless, which I think most every trail race is cupless, so it's hardly even worth mentioning. Amy also mentioned, if you can find a porta potty company that is green in some way, like there's a local company here in Washington, it's called Green Latrine that we use, and the reason we use them is because they use more environmentally friendly products. So that's a big thing. Shoe recycling is something that we've implemented as well, where it's not really, shoes are a very indirect part of the carbon emissions of a race, but nearly everybody has a pair of rain shoes in their closet that they are done with for one reason or another, and might just throw in the garbage. And it's real easy. There's a company called Got Sneakers. They will send you giant bags and you fill them up with shoes and you drop them off at FedEx and they'll recycle them. And we've hundreds of pairs have been recycled already at our races, because it turns out everybody has a pair of shoes in their closet that they just don't know what to do with. Yeah, and so anyways, those are the things that we've done to kind of offset versus reduce our footprint. And so I'm ready for the next point, Carrie. Yeah, where to get your offset? So that's an easy one, because you go to Claire, you go to Native Energy, and you say, here's my footprint, what's available. And so Claire talked a whole lot about this. The only thing that I'll say, besides using Native, is that personally, and this is really a personal preference, is that there are projects out there that are, like Claire talked about, they're about reduction or removal versus avoidance. And I feel like there are some carbon removal or carbon projects out there that seem to have like a triple effect of where they kind of provide a benefit to the local economy wherever they are, and then they also reduce offsets, and they also improve the lives of the people in that community. So the most recent offset we purchased was a cook stove project, where it's giving people more efficient cook stoves. And that means that they're living with a less smoky house. They're using less wood to cook and heat their foods and whatnot. And it's also allowing them to do it faster. So that's kind of what I like to look for. But everybody can have their own preferences about their offsets. So as long as they're well vetted and have that transparency that Claire talked about, I think it all works. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you, Porter. Yeah, I think it's so important. I mean, you used a great word towards the end there, experimenting, and I think there isn't this the whole idea about being carbon neutral or zero carbon or carbon negative, and is relatively new in terms of the running industry, and so it's we're still kind of learning our way, aren't we? It's we haven't got it all figured out yet. And I thought I was talking about this with Claire before the webinar started, but I wanted to share. I've come across a company here in the UK. It's called UltraX, and they're incentivizing competitors to offset their flights and travel by promoting a travel carbon calculator at registration, and then offering the financial cost of their carbon offset in race entry discounts. and I thought that's a pretty cool. I mean, again, it's it's kind of experimental with something. I don't know how it's working. I haven't had a chance to connect with them yet, but I thought that's any way we can get engagement. Because that's one of the biggest challenges. It's like, I think for Porter and Amy, then kudos to you that you've been able to pretty sweetly switch on that $1.96 and had pretty minimal backlash for you. So, but of course for other races, then it'll be a different situation, especially if you have people coming from international homes, and if you're a destination race. Rather than local runners coming to you, then it creates a whole different issue. So yeah, I think experimentation is a really good thing to do. And I think I've said this a couple of times on webinars before, but if we try and use the same mindset, the same way of thinking, as created the problem, then we're not going to come up with a really effective solution. So I think that's another important thing to bear in mind. Yeah, the Ghost got Sneakers, was that the company you mentioned, Porter? Yeah, yeah. Oh, Porter, you're still on mute.
They will pay you. You don't get a lot, and then you can take that money and you can either keep it or you can donate it to a nonprofit. So it's great.
Yeah. Cool. And is it okay if I share link for them in the information I send out as well?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, and Amy, thank you for sharing. I saw you put up some of those sponsors that you've been working with, who are sustainable, and I think that's a really important piece of this as well. Is if we set out with this kind of intention that every piece of what we're doing is helping to support a sustainable planet, a sustainable sport, which will then help our planet, then I think we're heading in a good direction. Yeah, I think kudos to you. Fat Tire, I can't believe that's still the only carbon neutral beer.
I mean, I don't know in the US, I believe, but
right.
I mean, the sponsors are a huge piece, especially if you don't want to, like, I don't give away anything like swag. There's no swag at my events, because it's just more to calculate when you're looking at the footprint. I did find a good brand, Recover, that makes custom t-shirts out of 100% recycled materials, which is the only brand that after like hours of research felt like a legit situation. So I did just get my first like t-shirts ordered, and they've been great.
Right. Cool. So the spreadsheet that Porter mentioned, I put up on the slide deck here. So that is there for you. The other thing I wanted to mention before we close is that I've for the last 2 years of 2021 and 2022, then I've been working with Native and Claire and her team to calculate the footprint for the US Trail Running Conference. That's been really interesting. And one thing that popped up for me this year was I completed, a spreadsheet with some details, and one thing that popped out was that was accommodation. So where I have myself and my staff, and then speakers and so on for the conference. So that's the kind of administrative footprint, if you like, and the Native spreadsheet included hotel accommodation. So how many rooms, how many nights? And it's like, I hadn't thought of that in 2021. And so now that's been included for 2022. So, just to give a shout for Claire and Native, that they've been really helpful and have guided me through, what is, to some extent, I mean, there's lots of pieces to it, but But once you actually know what it is that you're, as Porter said, once you know what your footprint is, the assumptions that you make, then really, if you set out with the intention of all you need is those pieces of information, plug them into some kind of spreadsheet, and you end up with an answer. And it doesn't literally doesn't need to take that long. And Amy as well. So kudos to you for starting up the Running Kind, and helping guide race directors through this process. And Porter, kudos to you for it's like, hey, we're working this all out, and we use this spreadsheet, so we might as well share it with other people and help each other. So thank you so much to our three panelists. We're just at the hour now, so yeah, appreciate your time and valued input, and yeah, looking forward to. I think that there's a lot of great movement, I think, within the sport to become more sustainable, to become zero carbon, carbon neutral, carbon negative. So I think we're heading in a good direction, and appreciate everybody's support out here, but particularly for you three folks on the panel here with me. So it's been an honor working with you, and I'm going to stop the recording now.